Thanks, everybody. Let me share you my presentation, and here we go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And my name's David Beckett. I'm a pitch coach, and I believe that great ideas need a voice. And as Ilda mentioned, I've been working with startups first for the last 8 years. I worked with over 1,400 startups, and between them, they raise a load of money. Now, I never say that's because of me, but every raise starts with a pitch. And the way that I help them is that they have to tell their story in 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And when we're faced with that time pressure and an audience, our brains can really fry. And that's the task with a pitch, is to tell that story in no time at all. So I've built a methodology which helps those startups to go through that stress of the time, of the audience, and be able to get their story across, get the key essentials and the true essence of the story over in that limited time. And Zelda also mentioned, over the years, I've started evolving into working with a lot of companies, and it's now over 30 countries. It's 29 plus, and trained 20,000 people. And what I see is that large companies, small companies, it doesn't really matter. What they're all experiencing is that people don't have time for long presentations in the early stage of the conversation, especially in that kind of sales situation where you're trying to get people onto the next stage. And so what they're looking for is a short, sharp pitch to find out, is there value for me in this? Is there value if I communicate with this person? If I spend more time on this topic, if I invest more of my energy, am I going to gain something? And my goal is always to give people that possibility to have their voice heard. And you know, sometimes you find that there are talented people with great ideas that could change lives, but they may never be heard. You know, maybe you've had this experience, or maybe you've been going through the Toastmasters kind of programs to overcome that feeling of, I can't get my voice heard. I've got this idea that could make things better. I've got this idea from my colleagues or my customers or for my company, but people are just not getting it. And my goal is to make sure that everybody can be heard, can be understood, and then not be judged on the pitch, but be judged on the quality of the proposition and the idea, because the pitch simply makes everything crystal clear. So I believe that great ideas need a voice, and that's what we're here for, to help you find a voice for your great ideas. Now, during this session, you'll receive various materials, and you'll always have the opportunity to ask in the chat or by voice. And if you come to the breakout room, there's going to be a whole bunch of extra stuff that you can access. So if you have any questions, feel free to, as mentioned, put your question in the chat with a question mark at the beginning. And I'm going to stop on 3 or 4 occasions during this session to take your questions and type your question in, or maybe if you want to just say, I've got a question, and then I'll ask you to unmute and you can call it out. But feel free to ask in the chat or by voice when I stop. So let's go into it. Let's make it real and practical. The first thing is, my goal is not that people can think about making a great pitch, it's that they can do it. So I'd like you to just think of something really practical that will help you make the very best of this session. So what I'd like you to do is spend 1 minute to write down the product, project, or idea that you want or need to pitch in the next days or weeks. So perhaps you've got a sales meeting, perhaps you're working in a company and you're going to be talking to your colleagues, or maybe you've got you're working for yourself, you're going to meet a new client or new potential client. Then write down the product, project, or idea that you want to pitch. And I'm going to give you 1 minute to do this, and also write down 1 sentence on who you will present it to. And we're going to think a little bit more about who you're presenting it to a little bit later. But the first thing I want you to do is just make it practical, and I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that. Now, the clock is always going to be ticking, and that's because I want you to feel the time pressure like you do in a pitch. So 1 minute to write it down. Well, there you go. My clock finished a little early there, so I'm going to give you even a bit more time. Let's set the clock again, let you listen to the music, and maybe I'll fast forward time a little bit. You were on about 40 seconds, so there you go. There's about 33 seconds to write it down. All right, so we've got something to work with during this session. So I'd like to ask you the question, what is a pitch? Now, please type 3 words into the chat. What do you think of when you hear the word pitch? And maybe it's helpful to think, okay, in comparison with the word presentation, what do you think of when you hear the word pitch? So please feel free to put this into the chat. So Colette mentioned sell, there's sales. Alexis mentioning an idea. Then we have sell a concept from Surya. Ilda mentions an idea, a short advertisement, convince people in 3 minutes about my idea. That's from Karsten. Absolutely. Thanks, Karsten. I saw your LinkedIn message today. Thanks for that. And find buyers, persuade others. That's from Melanie. And Lois is mentioning money. Absolutely. Elevator ride or elevator pitch. That's from Christian. I think that's also a common feeling about the pitch and influencing people. Jean mentioned sales share idea. Surya mentioned investment idea. So it's pretty useful to have these words in mind, because most of these words that you're seeing here in the chat are a little bit different to a typical presentation. For example, quick energy. Whereas if you've got a 30-minute or a 60-minute presentation, you might want to think about the moments during the presentation when you're going to have that energy. But in the pitch, energy from the first second might really count. And story. So being able to tell a clear beginning, middle, and end of that pitch, having a clear way of opening and a strong way of closing. So we're going to cover some of these things during this session, but here's my personal definition of what a pitch is all about. So I would say that a pitch is a time-pressured presentation. So the first thing is about time. It's under time pressure. And the second thing is with a clear ask. So many of you mentioned the words sell. So with the time pressure, it's about short. With the ask, it's about selling. You're trying to persuade somebody to go on to the next stage. Now, you're not necessarily getting them to sign a deal. You just want them to move on to the next step. Now, sometimes the next step is a deal, but many times the next step is a follow-up meeting, or it's a visit to your website, or it's introducing you to somebody else in the organization. So a clear ask and being crystal clear, asking for that action. Then the next part is a personal edge. So the point about a presentation being short and becoming a pitch is that people don't have enough information to make a purely rational decision. Now, that's a choice. They make a choice not to receive all the information. What they want to do is they want to have a quick hit of, is this something which is of interest? Is this something which I will gain from? Do we have value if we communicate between each other? So they also have to feel about that person. Can I trust this person? Do I like this proposition? Do I believe that this person is committed to this proposition? So pitch is a time-pressured presentation with a clear ask and a personal edge. Now, when are you pitching? I would argue that you're pitching with any communication where you need someone to take action. Now, as I say, that action could be sign a check, but it could simply be tell one other person about your proposition. Or it could be when you're hiring people. It could be when you're communicating to your boss, when you need someone to take a next step. Now, why do you need to keep it short? And there's many reasons about this, but I thought it's pretty helpful to have one short piece from an interview I did with Daniel Pink. So I have a podcast called The Essential Pitch. Feel free to check it out. And I got to talk with Daniel Pink, and he is the 16th most watched person on TED.com. His TED Talk has been watched more than 30 million times, and he's written some amazing books, including To Sell is Human and Drive, and a whole bunch of others. So when I interviewed him, I asked him, why is it important to make it short? Here's what he had to say.
Not everybody agrees with this, but I think that nearly every piece of communication can be made shorter. There is a power in brevity and in concision there, and what it does, as you're saying, David, is that simply starting with the constraints of some kind of brevity forces you to be clear.
So what Dan is saying is that when you're under a time pressure, so I quite often work with startups who have 3 minutes, 1 minute, 5 minutes to tell their story. When you have that time pressure, you're forced to get to the essence. You're forced to get clear. Now, that is a value. And he also explained that when it comes to, for example, how many arguments should you make about anything being good, he said that 3 is the optimum level. There is a lot of research that says if you give 1 argument for something being good, that's okay. If you give 2 arguments, that's better than 1. If you give 3 arguments, that's better than 2. But at 4 arguments, there's a really big drop-off. And he explained people feel like that might be insincere, they're trying too hard, so there's something that starts to break once you get past 3. So that brevity is really powerful, getting to the essence of the story quickly. Now, the biggest macro trend in the world is people have no time. Everybody is walking around in a state of, I'm full. And if they're not walking around that, if they're not really full, I'm super busy, they feel that they are super busy. So they're either full or they think they are. And that means that nobody really has a lot of time for long explanations, for explanations that take a long time to get to the point. Whereas everybody has time for a 30-second introduction, a 30-second pitch. But if you say to somebody, what do you do? And they give you a 5-minute answer, probably that's the end of the conversation. So we need to keep in mind that people have no time. So we need some tools to be able to deal with it. Now, when you're under time pressure, our brains don't really work properly. So we need to have some preparation in advance. We need some tools in our hands to get to grips with the time pressure. Otherwise, our brains cannot deal with it. We can't manage the communication. We end up saying things we don't want to say and doing things we don't want to do. So I've built a methodology, and I'm going to give you a world premiere today. And that's because I have spent the last 8 years purely focusing ruthlessly and relentlessly on helping people make a winning pitch, on helping them tell that story in no time at all. And I've built a methodology, and I've got various ways of doing this. I have a workshop, I have online courses, I have audiobook, all sorts of stuff. But finally, I realized that people need it fairly straightforward. They need it simple. So I've created the simplest framework that I can possibly make. And so here, the world premiere. Ta-da! Please welcome the Pitch Story Framework. Any pitch in 7 easy steps. And this is going to be the basis of my work in the future to help people make that winning pitch. And I'm going to introduce you to it today. I made a decision to share it with you first. It hasn't been published at all. So this is really a first for you. Now, what's it made up of? 7 steps. And those 7 steps are the context. Who's the audience? What's the objective? How long have I got? I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the context. We're not going to cover everything today, but we're going to cover a couple of the points in a bit of detail, and the context we're going to cover. Then the why. Why are you offering? Why have you created a proposition? What problem are you solving? Not what's my product, but more why did I create that product? Then of course we want to talk about our product. That's the shortest part of this workshop because that's the bit that most of us are pretty good at doing. But their why. Why are they interested? Why might they be interested? This is a really critical part of connecting with your audience. Then the trust. Why should they believe that you can deliver? The hook, that opening that grabs their attention and establishes, yes, this is a value. And the ask. So what do you need to make it happen? And how will you ask for that? Now, as I say, we're not going to cover all the details today, but I'm going to go through a few of these blocks. But before we do, I want to share with you one very big thing that is really different to the typical way of making presentations. And I've trained more than 20,000 people in this method, and this saves people between 20 and 30% of time for preparing any pitch or presentation. This method I'm going to share with you is going to give you days of your life back as of now if you put this into practice. And that's a promise. I know this to be true because people send me pictures of them doing the methodology that I'm going to share with you. So let me set it up for you. How do you create your pitch story? Well, how most people prepare a presentation or a pitch is they reach for the computer, open it up, and fire up good old PowerPoint. Now, it's unbelievable, really. If you think about the tools available for us for communication that have developed since 1987, that was when PowerPoint was launched, everything has changed. You know, we had SMS, and then we had smartphones, then we had WhatsApp, Slack, even things like Clubhouse. The communication tools are amazing. And what's the tool to help you with making a presentation? You've got it. Yes, it's PowerPoint, or indeed Prezi or Keynote or Google Slides, but fundamentally they all have one problem, and that is they don't work like your brain works. When you're creating a story, especially when you're working on a pitch, your brain is in random mode. You're trying to communicate about a new product, something that's developing, growing fast. It's changing and shifting. So each time you prepare your pitch, something new is happening. But the problem is, while you're typing slide 2, bullet point 3, 3 ideas have come into your head and gone out. Now, we need a tool that helps us capture our ideas, take a look at them, organize them, create a beginning, middle, and end of this pitch, and then build the slides. And that tool is one of the lowest tech tools in the world. So my first advice is stop and don't open PowerPoint or Keynote or Prezi until you know what you're going to say. And the tool is the Post-it note. Yes, there would be no innovation without the Post-it note. So let me show you how it works. And by the way, this also works with paper. You can get a sheet of A4, tear it into 6 pieces. Suddenly you have 6 Post-its without the sticky bits, but it still works. And but let me show you how the ninja tool works, and that's the Post-it. So using Post-its to build your storyline. Let me walk you through it. So it starts by brainstorming. Get the ideas out of your head. What's the problem you're solving? The solution you've created? What's unique about this solution? What's the proof? What's your track record? Who are the people behind it? And why are you committed to this story? Why are you committed to this proposition? What's your belief in it? And why you think this is great for these people? So first get your ideas out of your head. And ideally, you do this where you get 20, 30 different ideas written down. And once you've got those ideas written down, and maybe you work with a colleague or you work with somebody that's a kind of a sparring partner, you can even do this virtually using Miro or Mural. But ideally, you've got 30 or 40 different ideas, but perhaps you know you're only going to get 5 minutes or maybe 3 minutes. Then take a step back. What are the big issues for this pitch? And that's based on who's the audience, what's the objective, and how long have you got? So when you brainstorm first, you just brainstorm, you get the ideas out of your head. But when you come to narrow that down, audience, objective, how long have you got? We're going to talk about that next, about how we identify audience, objective, and how long have we got. But once you've got that, then you think, okay, what are the big issues here? I've written a bunch of stuff down. Which are the things I'm going to talk about? And organize around chapter headings, around the big pillars of the content. Now, let me share you what that might look like. The first brainstorm might look like this.
Yeah, you have a small bar blocking the your screen. I'm not sure if it has to do with your presentation or another app that may be on.
It's actually, I keep getting messages saying that people are entering the waiting room, and it's not possible to move it, unfortunately. I keep closing it, but it keeps popping up. You see it's gone now, Ilda, but it's just popped up again.
Right, I see it. Okay, thank you.
If we remove your co-host privileges, it will go.
Okay. Should I do that, or will Ilda do that?
Well, I'll take care of it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. So what does it look like on the left here? This is how your brain looks like when you open PowerPoint. You have a lot of ideas bouncing around, and we need to narrow them down. But in order to narrow them down, we need to take a look at them. It doesn't work to try and squeeze all those ideas into the PowerPoint. Now, what you'll see on the left here are a bunch of topics: pain, product, demo, unique, team, traction, and so on. And these are typical pillars of startup pitches, and many of these pillars will work for you. No matter what business you're in, communicating the pain, showing them what the product looks like, communicating uniqueness and why you're committed to this and what you need as a next step, these are absolutely universal requirements for any pitch. But of course, this is way too much information. Supposing you have a 3-minute pitch or a 5-minute pitch. But you need to go take a step back and think, okay, who's the audience? What's the objective? How long have I got? So first we're going to say, okay, I'm always going to talk about the pain, but I've got 3 minutes. But I've got 11 things written down about the pain. Okay, for this 3-minute pitch, let's choose 3. Then I've got 7 things written down about the product. But again, I've got limited time to talk about the product. So let's choose 1 or 2 really key elements of the product, or a maximum of 3. The same goes with unique. Maybe we talk about 1 or 2 of the unique things about this business, and so on. And then you so that's taking a step back on what are the big issues, and organize around chapter headings. That's going to look a bit like this. The orange post-it notes are the chapter headings. The yellow post-it notes are the content and you pick those up from the left-hand side. So you start with a rough brainstorm, you take a step back, audience, objective, how long have you got? Pick out which the big pillars of that story are going to be, and which are the key messages per pillar. Now, the great thing about this is that you effectively prototype your pitch, and you get to see the beginning, middle, and end. You can never do this in PowerPoint. It's impossible. Even if you look at the slide organizer, you will always see small thumbnails. You can never really see any detail. This gives you the possibility to see the whole thing, and you can see, is this the right flow? Is this the story that I want to tell in these 3 or 5 minutes? Now, by the way, this method also works for longer presentations. This was for a public presentation with TomTom, the head of HR, and this was a 20-something minute conference speech. And we worked through using Post-its as well. And what you can see is that my personal addiction for the power of 3, which shows up pretty much everywhere, you also see it here, 3, 3, and 3, but it doesn't always need to look as pretty. It can end up being 1 point per chapter, or 3, or even 7 or 6. What's important is to take a look at your ideas and not get caught up in building the PowerPoint. So before we move on, I just want to check if there's any questions, and I'll come out of the presentation for a moment and see if you have any questions about what you've seen so far in terms of using Post-its. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to raise it. And if not, then I will move on to the next step. All right. Now, as I say, people send me pictures of them doing this Post-it brainstorm. So I can highly recommend that this is a great way to save yourself a lot of time. I have the question from Pamela, how long does it normally take? And actually, you can do this for, it can be very long, but if you had limited time, I think this is the quickest way to help you get a presentation. And what that note about getting stuck in the process, I highly recommend to give yourself a kind of a limited time and just quickly get the ideas out. And in 30 minutes, you could have 90% of the possible content written down. And especially if you just write a couple of words or one sentence per Post-it, rather than trying to sketch out the full idea. The goal is to get the ideas out of your head and take a look at them. Okay, thanks, Pamela. And I'm going to take you back to the presentation, and let's talk about the first step of the pitch story framework. So we need to talk about the context, and the context is all about getting clear on what's happening around you. It's less about what the story I want to tell, and it's more about the people I'm telling it to and the result that I want to have in what time I've got available. So the context is built up of who is the audience, What do they care about? What's the objective? What do I want these people to do? And how much time do I have? And also, how do I keep on time? So who's your audience and what do they care about? And I want you to just give a little bit of thought to this. Now, I think you're probably people that try to tune into the audience, but I'm going to give you a trigger of 5 different things, 5 or 6 different things that you can think about for the audience, for the pitch that you've already identified. We said we're going to focus on a particular pitch for you. So think about that pitch you've written down and who the audience is. And think, what is their biggest challenge? What's really on their mind right now? What's the biggest thing they're bothered about? Then, are they conservative or innovative? And sometimes people say they're innovative, but actually they just want things a bit better than what they have. Then, are they money focused? So let me take on that conservative or innovative point. So if you present a very innovative new idea to somebody who's very conservative, there will be a mismatch. Conservative people want to build on what they've already got. Innovative people want to break it down and build it better. So the key is to get tuned in to how do they actually think. Then, are they money focused? And if it is money focused, they want to save cost. Do they want to grow? And if there's other elements to it, for example, any environmental issues or any social issues, educational issues, what's on their mind? And can you tune into that? Are they theoretical or doers? Theoretical people want to know the process that you took to get here. Doers, sales and marketing people, for example, they want to know what happens next. Whereas engineers or project managers, they want to know process. So which kind of people are you talking to? And then what might be their biggest objection? The number one reason why they might say, this will never work because. The more you get tuned into that, the more possibility you have to recycle that into the pitch. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to write this down for the pitch that you've identified and get into the process of thinking it through and writing it down. So here we go. 2 minutes starts just now. So you have the audience written down, and why does this matter? And I think if you ask 100 people, do you think about your audience when you prepare your presentation? I think 90 out of those 100 people will say yes, maybe even 100 of them. If you ask those people, do you write down anything about your audience, and they had to give an honest answer, I would say that at least 90 people would have to say no. Now, why does it matter about writing it down? It's because once you write it down, it sticks. And you can keep that little profile of your audience by the computer when you're preparing your slides. See, what happens is when we're preparing a story, we get very internally focused. We're very focused on what do I do? What do we do? But what we need to communicate is what does what we do help them with reaching their goals? That's the number one thing about a pitch. Not what do we do, but more, what does what we do help that audience reach their goals? And in order to know that, we need to think through and get into the mind and the world of the audience. So this is the first step, writing down who the audience is. The second step is, what's your objective? What do you want these people to do as a result of the pitch? Now, if I look back on my time, I used to work for Canon, the camera company, and I gave more than 1,000 presentations. I was known as a good presenter, but if there was one thing I wish I could have known in that time, at the very beginning of my career, back in '92, I wish somebody had said, every single time you present, think, what do you want these people to do as a result of the pitch? And that's because quite often I handed the information over and said, here it is. Then it's over to them what they do with it. But we want them to take action. So think about, what could they do at 9:30 on a Monday morning? Now that's really different to thinking differently. You know, maybe you want them to think positively about the proposition, or be supportive, or believe in the product. But believe, think, be supportive, these are all thinking things. We need action. So what would that action be? Is it pick up the phone when you said you would call them for a follow-up meeting? Visit your website and download something? Tell one person this sentence about your business, for example. The more you can narrow it down to really an action that they could take at 9:30 on a Monday morning, this will really help. And give them something they can say yes to. You know, if you want them to sign a check for $300,000, that's probably not going to happen because of this 3-minute pitch. But a follow-up meeting, to have a first conversation, that's something they can say yes to. So focus on actionable objectives. So what I'd like you to do is spend 1 minute to write down, what do you want the audience to do as a result of the pitch? Focus on action, not just thinking differently. Think about that 9:30 on a Monday morning moment. So here we go. All right, so we have the audience and the objective. And I can tell you that over these 8 years, it's only become more and more clear to me how important it is to spend time to identify these two things. This will really save you, if you put this together with the post-it note method, it's going to save you a lot of time, because it helps you make decisions. What will I say? What won't I say? Because you constantly have to make that decision, especially for a pitch, because you have no time. So you have to leave things out. How do you decide? By tuning into the audience. Which parts of your story resonate most with their challenges, with what they want to achieve? Then the third part is respecting the time allocated. Now, this is really challenging. 84% of presentations don't finish on time. And finishing on time, I think, is the sign of a professional. And not finishing in time can mean you won't finish at all in many situations. You know, increasingly, we're put under time pressure, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And so it's maybe useful to know how many words you can say in 1 minute. Now, maybe you guys already know this. So if you do, feel free to put this in the chat, or if you don't, just give it a guess. How many words do you think you can say in 1 minute and remain understandable? I'll just come out of the presentation, have a look. I see Mary mentions 400. And I see there's a question, sorry, I'll come back to that. 130 from Carsten, 115 from Yimwan. Pamela reckons 100. Michelle, 100. 750 from Colette. 100 from Akib. Surya is saying 100 or less. We're down to 50 with Elena, and up to 200 with Andre. Now, by the way, you'll see a lot of different numbers here. There's a big range, 140 there, 220 from Jay, and 120 to 150 from Mahak. You're hedging your bets there. So I've seen numbers between 2 and 1,000. Why? Because we all have a different idea of what time means. Everybody has a different idea of what time means. And so we need to feel, what does time mean for us? Now, it turns out that people can listen at 150 words per minute. 150 words per minute. So let me take you back to the presentation and share with you what I would recommend if you have a time pressured pitch. And I hit this so that you wouldn't see it by mistake. So I'm going to unskip it and bring it back. Yes. So 150 is the maximum. So if you were preparing a 3-minute pitch, I would recommend make a script and make that script between 130 and 140 words per minute. This means there's enough energy for there to be, there's enough speed for some energy, something's happening here, but there's enough air around the key points for the information to land and for you to give some space in between this topic and the next topic. Now, I've worked with startups and all kinds of people that have had to make time pressured pitches. And I know that if they have more words than this, they either have to speak so fast that people can't follow or they won't finish on time. It's consistently proven. So this is a really good benchmark to have a look at. Now I'm just going to come to the questions. I saw there's a couple of questions in the chat. So if you have more, feel free. Let me see. We had some a little earlier. Conservative people, that's coming from Carsten, which are very detailed and money focused. They need exact numbers. Absolutely. How can I solve the problem, deliver a lot of detail and context in 5 minutes? Well, I think, Carsten, what people need are a few anchor points. So I highly recommend making things specific. I'll talk about that shortly. But sometimes people need numbers, but they don't need many. They just need enough to be able to get a kind of their fingernails on the topic so that they get the feeling you've thought this through, you've got some real anchor points. So for example, if you say parking's quite difficult, we made an app for that, people will say, really? How difficult is it? Yeah, I don't have a car. Why, is it that difficult? If you can't park, take the bus. Whereas if you say, on average in cities like Amsterdam, it takes people over 20 minutes every day to find a parking space. And can you imagine you're going to spend 1 year of your lives looking for a parking space? Suddenly it becomes a more solid, specific issue. So you don't have to load it with numbers, but for people who like to have numbers, give them a few. So they've got something to work with and let them ask more questions and have plenty in the backup. Thanks for your question, Carsten. Let me see. There's a couple of other questions along the way.
Yes, I have them. If you'd like me to say, give it to you.
Please.
So there was, Karsten also asked, what is the, no, I'm sorry. Let me go to, what is the optimal, from Elena, what is the optimal team to brainstorm with? Like how many people should be in a team to produce a good brainstorming session? I think
it doesn't matter so much. More than one is always good. And I think, you know, when you build a presentation, you want to have the different people in the team put their thoughts together. But as you get closer to the pitch, you want the person who's going to make the pitch to start making more of the decisions. So 2, 3, 4 people, that's a really ideal number. If it gets more than 4, you find that somebody doesn't have a voice. So you need to really manage that brainstorm and make sure that it's only about writing stuff down, not saying stuff. So it's not one person at the flip chart and people speak and that person writes. It should be everybody with a post-it and everybody's able to write their ideas down. And one person simply puts them up. That's the idea with the brainstorm. And then you can have more people. But as you get closer to the pitch, narrow it down to more people, to one person who's deciding that the details. So you kind of collaborate on what's the basic message, but really the refinement. You know, do you say we're going to execute on this high-level strategic plan in the next 3 quarters, or do you say we've got an amazing plan and we're going to make it happen by the end of the year? Different people have different ways. I prefer the second one, but if you're a little bit more technical person, then that person should speak that way. Thanks for the question. Let's take one more.
Then, yeah, sure. Surya asked in details for context, how to build it for new prospects.
I think you mean how do you build the information about, the details of the context that I've just shown you. Okay, so how do you know who your audience is? Well, the first thing is just even spending time to think about it, even if you don't know much about them, that helps you make a decision about the level of details you should go into. But just check their LinkedIn profile. Go and check them out online, see if they've posted anything. Do they have a blog? I mean, there's an investor I know right now who is writing a blog every week. And if you want to have a meeting with that guy and don't mention his blog, I think that's a really missed opportunity, because clearly he's sharing his thoughts about this whole thing and he wants to share those. So you need to demonstrate, I've read your stuff, I'm tuning into it. So make sure you can find out anything that you can on LinkedIn and then you can, or LinkedIn or online, and then you can a little bit adapt. You don't have to completely change your pitch, but maybe just one thing that connects with that person will make all the difference. Elder, in the interest of time, I'm going to go back into the presentation and we'll take another little question round in a few minutes. I need to have the screen sharing just enabled, if you wouldn't mind. Just for now, and then you can take it out. Thank you very much. All right. Now let's talk about what I think is the backbone of any pitch, and that is the pain. So the why of the product is the problem that you're solving. So let me just build it up for you. The why is built up of what's the problem you solve, what's the problem causing, and how big is that problem. Now, most people want to start with, here's my product. But mostly people are not so interested in products. What they're interested in is having their problem solved. And if you're pitching to an investor, they want to recognize that there's a problem worth solving. If you're pitching to a customer, they need to be able to see the value of that problem being solved for them, whether that's saving them time or money or frustration. So what's the problem that you solve? So let's talk about this. And I really believe that the problem is the why of the product. And if you think about, why did you create your business? Why are you offering propositions? Why did your company, or why did you create this proposition? It wasn't to create a proposition. It was to solve a problem and sell that solution. So we need to get really focused on the why of the product. And I highly recommend, what's the human result of the problem you're solving? So let me take that parking app example. If you built a parking app, you could give people some statistics which help them quickly understand the issue. But what you could also do is make it a human result. You see, parking is not the problem. That's not the issue. That's a technical description. And the technical description, the product that solves it is, parking's difficult. We built an app that has Internet of Things and connects with sensors and uses blockchain to help people park. But that's really not so interesting for people. What's more interesting, the human result. So what you can say is, can you imagine, on average, it takes people over 20 minutes to find a parking space. Now, what does that mean? It means that while they're driving around in circles to find that elusive parking space, it's driving them nuts, that person's family is sitting down to have dinner without them again. Or their friends are in the bar, it's the big football competition, they're waiting for kickoff, they're all having their first drink, and meanwhile that person is still in the car, driving around in circles, going crazy. Now that's the human result of parking: lost time, lost experience, frustration. It's not a technical problem, it's a human problem. So can you make your problem, the problem you solve, a human problem? Now, the more that you go down this route, the stronger your pitch will be. Is it lost time, more cost, complex steps, irritation? And maybe if you've got a B2B proposition, then maybe the company is losing customers, losing reputation. Now, if you look at that person driving around, probably cost is not the issue. It's frustration, lost time. Lost time is one of the biggest drivers possible, maybe the biggest driver. It's the one single thing we cannot buy more of. So if you've got something that saves people time, it's incredibly powerful. And if you can quantify that time, today it takes people this amount of time, Tomorrow, it takes this much less time, the better it is. So think about what's the human result of the problem you're solving, and then what is it costing in terms of time. Now, I highly recommend to be specific. Put a number on it. And that number it doesn't work if it's general. You see, we don't believe general statements like it wastes a lot of hours or they have to make a lot of calls. That's a general statement, and our cynical brain immediately says, really, how many hours? Really, you have to make a lot of calls? I can't imagine. How many calls is it? Something in our brains always has that little cynical edge to it, even if we're very positive, but we don't quite believe general statements. When you say it takes up to 72 hours, that's specific. Then they have to make up to 30 calls. And these are quotes from specific pitches from particular pitches of clients of mine, where we turned it from general statements to specific statements, and these really made a difference to the way their pitches landed. That makes it much more easy for people to get into their mind. And then market size and opportunity. Even if you're not a startup, how many people are experiencing this problem? This is a problem that's affecting thousands of people or millions of people. What is it that is the opportunity here? And how big is the market and the opportunity? If you're pitching an idea as a startup, that matters. If you're just pitching to a customer, you can say, this is a very common problem for companies like yourselves. We've come across thousands of companies that are experiencing this problem, or thousands of people, and we've managed to help those people save this much time, this much money. People like to know that they're not alone. They like to feel that they're part of that. But if you're pitching an idea for investment, definitely showing a human problem for one person and then expanding that to how many people are experiencing. Well, there's tens of thousands of people with this problem in just this country, and in the world, worldwide, there's this many people. So this is the way we can share the opportunity. Now I'm going to jump very quickly to the last thing I want to talk about. Let me just keep an eye on time, because a pitch is all about finishing on time, and I'm going to just talk to you about one more thing, and that is their why. We're going to skip the product, because the product is the thing that we really love to talk about. We love talking about what is it, what does it look like, what's its USPs, and what's the business model if you're a startup. Not so relevant if you're just pitching maybe your own services or your own business, but if you're a startup, that's really important. But especially, what is it, what does it look like, what's unique? This is pretty standard for product pitches. But people want to know why it should matter to them. What's their why? The audience's why. And that will be influenced by how much does it match their strategy and goals? Why is now the right time? And is there a higher mission that they can buy into? Let me just explain a little bit more. So if you look at most people, the reality is they're focused on themselves. And especially customers, when they consider suppliers, they are looking at, how does what you offer help me? Now, when I worked in Canon, we received lots of pitches from lots of companies. And I would sit in these meetings from these fancy agencies, and the first 10 minutes would be them telling us how great they are. And I think you can do that in about 30 seconds, maybe even 45 seconds or a minute. But for 10 minutes, telling me how great, Jim in their strategy department is, I would sit there thinking, yeah, fine, but what are you going to do for me? How are you going to help me reach my goals? How are you going to help my company reach our goals? And so I think we need to get to grips with this. Their strategy and ambitions are what they care about. So how do you help them reach their goals? And I can't stress this enough. A pitch is not, here's what we do. A pitch is, here's what we do to help you reach your ambitions. So getting clear on what is their strategy, the better it is. Now, of course, you can't always know everything about that, but just trying to get some kind of idea, or indeed in a pre-call before you have a sales meeting, find out something about what they're trying to achieve. What are they changing? And why now? What major trends are happening that drives change? Why is this the time for action? Create some kind of an urgency. what we find today is that companies in this area, which is of course your customer, are really struggling with such and such. And what they're finding is their business is dropping by this much, or they're losing time, or they're wasting time on administration. And so this is the time to change, because if they don't, then their business is going to really suffer. What's the major trend? It needs to be specific, not something made up. But is there a major trend that drives change? Then purpose. And this is becoming more and more important, and quite rightly so. Is there something beyond money? What is it that could be their purpose? Is there a human impact? Is there something about environment or social? What is their purpose? And how does what you have to offer help them meet their purpose, help them get there? So nothing beats strategy, nothing beats purpose. So getting tuned in to those people, and that will help you to make decisions about which things you say, which things you don't say. That's the challenge in a pitch. You're always under time pressure. So the task is really to get absolutely focused on what is it that is in their minds, and which things on my story will resonate when I'm under time pressure. Now, I want to tell you one more thing before we break off, take some questions, and that is about the trust. And the trust is built up on 3 different things. As you see, I'm a power of 3 addict. And the trust is built up of your track record, the team behind it, and why are you doing this? And I just want to focus on that one before we finish off with a couple more questions. And that is, why are you doing this? Why you? You see, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people who listen to pitches, whether that's investors or board members or people in the tourism industry, the cruise line industry, in insurance, in banking. I've spoken to people in all kinds of industries. They all say basically the same thing. They say, I want to hear the rational stuff. What's the problem you're solving, solution you've created? How does it help me reach my goals, and so on? But they also all say, I want to know why you're enthusiastic about this. Why do you think this is a great idea? I need to see the enthusiasm from the presenter. So what's your personal motivation to offer this proposition? Don't underestimate this. This is the difference between taking somebody from a maybe to a, okay, let's go to the next step. And why did you start this in the first place? If it's your own business, why did you get started? What drives you? What is it that makes you excited? And especially what makes you excited about your proposition is really important. Now, notice you can't be excited about everything all the time. If you say, hey, it's an amazing system that we use, it's highly technical and blah, 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 and you tell all the technical details with amazing enthusiasm, people might think you're a bit nuts. But there's always something, the coolest thing that we built into this, and what people really love is such and such. Find the bit that makes you excited and be animated about that proposition. Your enthusiasm really counts. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wrap up the main section of this presentation. And I want to share with you that if you go to, you can get my free app, which is called Pitch Professional. If you go to the iOS, so the App Store or Google Play, you can get my free app. It's called Pitch Professional, all one word. And there you will get some pitch video tips. You'll get some pitch examples, videos of clients of mine that have used the tools and put them into practice, and a lot of information about a tool called the Pitch Canvas. So that's completely free. Do look out for the Essential Pitch podcast. And if you come to my breakout room, there's a bunch of other stuff which I can share with you. There's an offer on my academy, which is a really big discount. So you'll be able to get that for a very low price. But more to the point, you'll be able to get the workshop slides, the online presentation checklist, and I have a free audiobook of Pitch to Win. And there's Carsten there has read the German version. So Carsten, if you want to listen to the English audio version, then come along to the breakout room. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take a couple more questions before we wrap up. Before we do though, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, then I'm more than happy to connect with you. And my website is Best 3 Minutes. Do come to the breakout room in the following half an hour. And I'd love to answer any more of your questions and share with you all those materials. But do check out my free app and the Essential Pitch podcast. There's a lot of interesting chats there, which you'll find very practical takeaways.